Hello, and welcome again to this week's edition of We'd Rather See This, a news and public affairs program about the growing international cannabis industry. This is Marguerite Arnold reporting animatedly from Frankfurt. This week, a look at the German medical cannabis market as yet another foreign firm gains EU-GMP certification and access to the same. Natural CBD gets its own listing on the Cosing Index, and an American basketball legend sets up a $100 million fund to finance minority cannabis firms in the United States as New Jersey finally becomes the next U.S. state to approve recreational cannabis at the legislative level. First up, what is going on with the German medical cannabis market? Despite the COVID pandemic, the world's largest regulated medical cannabis region continues to power forward, and Germany is certainly an important driver of that. Materia, a British-Canadian medical cannabis and wellness firm, announced its GMP licensing success as of late January. This gives the company the right to not only import but manufacture cannabis products in Germany, including sourced from its cultivation center on the island of Malta. But of course, Materia is not the only international firm with their sights set on the valuable medical German market. Overall, imports of flower, and at this point from multiple countries, were up year over year in 2020, even as more firms made moves to enter the processed oil market or even the basic dronabinol one. These are the latest import figures for flower, or cannabis floss, released by BfArM, the German Medical and Medical Devices Agency, kind of like a Deutsche FDA. This increase in imports is occurring as the producers who won the rights to German cannabis cultivation struggle to bring this domestically grown product to German pharmacies. The latest update on this front is that the first German-grown cannabis will not reach apothecas until the fall of 2021, now delayed a full year by the pandemic. Imports are the lifeblood of the medical market and will continue to be even after the German cultivation tender comes fully online. Beyond the strictly medical market, the European CBD industry is also set for more clear sailing in the coming months. The reason? Actually several. Last year, the WHO removed cannabis from its list of narcotics, which allowed the European Commission in turn to do the same. However, as a result, and in some ways more importantly, natural CBD has now been added to the so-called Cosing Index, a European list of substances which are consumed by humans. The good news? Many of the roadblocks to developing a CBD-based product for food or cosmetics have now been structurally removed, as well as the general prohibition on advertising and marketing them. It is clearly a new day in the commercial CBD biz, and companies all over Europe and the UK are clearly taking note. Also of interest, the European Industrial Hemp Association, or EIHA, has moved forward with its own novel food application for CBD. The debate, however, as a result of the Cosing listing, is now firmly a strategy one for every firm in this space, namely whether to formulate and market your product under novel food guidelines or good old EU BO. A fascinating regulatory discussion for sure, and further one likely to take place well into the future. And finally, across the pond, New Jersey became the next U.S. state to cross the recreational reform line, not just at the ballot box, but in reality. Voters passed an amendment to create the market with expedited speed in November last year during the presidential election, with about two-thirds of voters approving. Nevertheless, the legislation, which was supposed to be signed into law by December, was only just approved by Governor Phil Murphy on Monday. Murphy delayed his signature for close to 2 months over concerns that young black people would somehow still be unfairly targeted by law enforcement, even in a state which now has formally decriminalized possession. In the meantime, former NBA player and entrepreneur Chris Webber just announced he is launching a $100 million investment fund specifically focused on minority firms who want to work in the cannabis sector. He is partnering with JW Asset Management, a firm actively pursuing investments in the cannabis vertical in the U.S. since 2014, with more than $2 billion in assets under management. The goal of the endeavor is to give minorities who have suffered disproportionately thanks to current federal and state laws, including being punished for simple possession with jail time, a leg up in what is clearly a growth industry, not only in the U.S., but far from its shores. Indeed, with this kind of support, minority participation in the industry might become a whole new ballgame. That's it for this week's edition of We'd Rather See This. A special shout out to our new sponsor, the International Cannabis Business Conference, or ICBC. This is Marguerite Arnold. See you next week, same Pro Cannabis channel.